Tonight, the collective is learning that before the scroll was rolled, the stone was already speaking. This is the scroll of the pyramid texts, the ancient Kemetic utterances carved into hidden chambers, where words were not decoration, they were ladders. Tonight, we enter the mystery of sacred speech, star memory, resurrection, protection, and the soul becoming imperishable. This is not dusty tomb poetry. This is spiritual architecture. The chamber becomes a womb. The wall becomes a scripture. The word becomes a command. The soul hears, rise. Because the old ones knew what the modern age keeps forgetting while arguing with its own notifications. A body may enter silence, but the soul is not finished just because the room got dark. Tonight, the collective learns that some chambers are not graves. Some chambers are where the sacred carves your next name into the wall. Come closer to the stone. Tonight, we do not enter a pyramid as tourists with dusty sandals and shallow captions. We enter as listeners, because the walls are speaking. Before papyrus carried the spell, before ink stretched across the scroll, before the world got loud enough to mistake noise for wisdom, the pyramid texts were carved into sacred chambers like instructions for the soul, not suggestions. Utterances, commands of ascent, words made to protect, feed, awaken, restore, and raise the one traveling beyond the visible world. The old stone does not say, lie down and be forgotten. The old stone says, gather yourself, remember your name, open your mouth with power, receive what feeds the spirit, pass what tries to stop you, rise. That is the current tonight. The collective is learning that sacred speech is not empty sound. A true word can become a ladder, a clean name can become a gate, a prepared soul can become luminous, a dark chamber can become the place where resurrection gets its paperwork stamped. Because apparently even rising requires documentation. Ancient Kemet was thorough like that. The pyramid texts teach that transformation does not always begin in sunlight. Sometimes it begins in silence. Sometimes it begins behind sealed doors. Sometimes it begins when the old version of you has been wrapped, mourned, and placed in the chamber because it cannot carry the next assignment. And that is not punishment. That is preparation. The chamber is not always the end. Sometimes the chamber is where the sacred teaches the soul how to become imperishable. So tonight, let the collective listen deeper. What wall has been speaking to you in silence? What old self needs to stop pretending it still owns the throne? What sacred word must be carved into your spirit before the next gate opens? What part of you is not dead, but waiting for the right utterance to rise? The stone remembers. The stars are listening. The soul is being gathered. And the old text whispers through the chamber. You are more than what buried you. You are more than what wrapped you. You are more than the darkness that held you. Speak the rise. Become the utterance. Let the chamber become the womb. And when the gate opens, do not crawl out apologizing for surviving. Stand. The pyramid texts have spoken.
Channeled by your architect musician, 36110, 27 palms of eyes. The golden whisperer, sea star, Devalan see all. Apply the news you can use, truth and accuracy. The real non-bedazzled jewels.
We go older than Prit M. ARW into the pyramid texts, the stone-carved Old Kingdom prayers, hymns, and spells found inside pyramids at Saqqara, with Unaz's pyramid being the earliest known example. These texts are described as intended to protect the dead king or queen and ensure life and sustenance in the hereafter. Translation: the walls were talking before paper got popular. The scroll of the pyramid texts, the stone utterances that taught the soul to become imperishable. Before the papyrus carried the spell, the stone carried the voice. Before the scroll unrolled in the hand, the pyramid walls were already speaking. Not whispering, speaking, in carved divine words, in chambered silence, in sacred formulas meant to raise the royal soul beyond decay, beyond forgetting, beyond the hungry mouth of time. This is the scroll of the pyramid texts, the old stone utterances, the chamber script of ascent, the sacred architecture of becoming imperishable. And no, beloved collective, this is not old death poetry for a dusty king with excellent stonework. That is the lazy version. And lazy versions always show up wearing confidence they did not earn. This is older fire. This is the place where word, wall, breath, star, tomb, body, sky, and resurrection all meet in one carved command. Rise. That is the first law of this scroll. The soul is not meant to rot with what once carried it. Let that land, because the pyramid texts do not speak like the end has won. They speak like the body has become a chamber. The chamber has become a gate. The gate has become a sky road, and the sky road is waiting for the one who remembers how to ascend. The stone says, "Get up, gather yourself, receive your bones, stand at the gate, eat what does not decay, join what does not fall, become one of the imperishable ones." That is not mourning. That is command. The old ones understood something modern people keep forgetting while scrolling themselves into confusion. A sacred word placed correctly can outlive an empire. The pyramid texts were not written for entertainment. They were not decorative wall quotes. They were not live, laugh, ascend carved in limestone, although given how people behave, someone would probably try to sell that as a pillow. No, these were utterances of power. Words meant to feed, protect, awaken, open, defend, guide, transform, and lift. They were carved into the hidden chambers because the unseen journey required unseen literacy. The soul had to know how to move, how to speak, how to answer, how to rise, how to become more than a dead memory trapped in a beautiful building. That is the deeper lesson. The tomb was not only a place of burial, it was a spiritual machine of transformation. Stone became scripture. Architecture became ritual. The chamber became a womb, the pyramid became a ladder, and the sky became inheritance. Now let the collective breathe with that. Because this scroll is not only about ancient kings and queens. This is about the soul learning to rise from what enclosed it. Every one of us has known a chamber, a season that felt sealed, a silence that felt permanent, a grief that felt carved into the walls, a betrayal that shut the door. A transformation that looked like an ending because the dawn had not arrived yet. The pyramid texts say, "The chamber is not always your grave. Sometimes the chamber is where the new voice is carved." That is wisdom with a spine, because people love declaring something dead before the sacred has finished working in the dark. They see a closed door and call it defeat. They see silence and call it abandonment. They see the old self falling away and start trying to glue the corpse back together because apparently familiarity is more comforting than freedom. The stone says, "Stop embalming what your soul has outgrown." Tiny ancient side-eye. Fully justified. The pyramid texts teach ascent. But ascent is not floating away in glittery delusion. Ascent means becoming capable of a higher state. That takes preparation. The name must be restored. The limbs must be gathered. The mouth must be opened. The offerings must be received. The enemies must be warded off. The path must be known. The sky must recognize the traveler. Nothing about this is random. The soul rises through order, through word, through ritual, through alignment, through becoming effective. The old texts speak of the dead becoming an Ahll, a transfigured, effective, luminous being, not just surviving, becoming radiant enough to belong among the undying stars. And there it is, the star teaching. The pyramid texts look upward. They speak of the king joining the imperishable stars, the deathless lights of the northern sky, the ones that do not sink below the horizon. That is not cute astronomy. That is cosmic identity. The soul is being told, you were not made only for the ground. You were made to remember the sky. This does not mean escape the earth. It means do not let the earth's heaviness convince you that heaviness is your only nature. The body is sacred. The earth is sacred. But the soul also has a stellar memory. And when the scroll says rise, it is not saying reject the body. It is saying do not confuse the body's ending with the spirit's limit. That one needs to sit in the chest. Because the collective is being trained to remember that endings are not always defeat. Sometimes endings are dismantling. Sometimes endings are a gate. Sometimes endings are the old structure admitting it cannot hold the next version of you. Sometimes endings are the sacred saying, the chamber has done its work. Now rise. The pyramid texts are full of food, breath, protection, power, sky, and transformation. Why? Because the soul is not treated like a vague idea. The soul is treated like a being in need of provision. That is compassion in ancient form. Feed the traveler. Name the traveler. Protect the traveler. Speak for the traveler. Raise the traveler. Do not abandon the one passing through mystery. The old ones understood care as ritual. Modern people send one sad emoji and vanish for 3 weeks. Civilization, naturally, remains suspicious. But the ancient current says, if the journey matters, prepare the traveler. That is legacy. Now listen deeper. The pyramid texts also teach the power of the spoken utterance. The word is not passive. The word does something. A word can summon. A word can command. A word can protect. A word can cut away danger. A word can make the dead rise in sacred form. A word can open the mouth so the soul may breathe, speak, eat, and participate again. This is why speech must be clean. This is why names matter. This is why Jehudi matters. This is why Tehotep matters. This is why Prit Emrabu matters. All these currents are connected by one ancient truth. The word carries power when the one speaking it is aligned with truth. Not when the mouth is dramatic. Not when the voice is loud. Not when someone bought a candle and gave themselves a title over the weekend. When aligned. The pyramid texts remind the collective that sacred speech is not noise with jewelry. Sacred speech is measured force. A true utterance has weight. A true utterance has direction. A true utterance has responsibility. And that is why not every sentence deserves to be spoken. Some words feed the soul. Some words rot the room. Some words become ladders. Some words become traps. Some words call your scattered pieces home. And some words keep you loyal to the chamber long after the door has opened. So this scroll asks, what are you speaking over your own resurrection? Are you telling your spirit to rise? Or are you chanting the old story until the tomb starts feeling like home? Are you feeding the luminous part or feeding the fear that wants to keep you wrapped? Are you carving words of ascent into your inner wall or carving complaints so deep that even freedom has to squint to read around them? The pyramid texts say, write the rise into the chamber. Speak the rise into the bones. Name the rise until the gate remembers you. Because sometimes the soul does not need more noise. It needs the right utterance, the right command, the right sacred sentence at the right threshold. Rise. That is the medicine. Not rush. Not pretend. Not bypass grief. Rise. Rise with your grief purified into wisdom. Rise with your memory restored. Rise with your bones gathered. Rise with your mouth opened by truth. Rise with your enemies unable to eat your light. Rise with your name intact. Rise with the stars recognizing what the world tried to bury. Now, this is where the scroll gets sharp. The pyramid texts were royal in their earliest chamber. They were tied to king and queen, throne and sky, divine order and afterlife. But the wisdom has a wider echo for the collective. Royalty is not only a crown. It is a state of spiritual responsibility. If you call yourself chosen, initiated, awakened, royal, priestly, divine, or any other expensive word people throw around when their ego gets bored, then the question is simple. Can your conduct survive the chamber? Can your speech feed life? Can your heart rise clean? Can your name stand in truth? Can your power protect rather than consume? Because the ancient texts did not just say you are important. They gave instructions. They gave structure. They gave obligations. Modern ego wants titles. Ancient wisdom gives assignments. Annoying? Yes. Necessary? Absolutely. The pyramid texts do not flatter the soul. They prepare it. And preparation is love with discipline. The old utterances know the journey has dangers. Serpents, enemies, forgetting, hunger, disorder, the pulling forces of decay. So the texts answer danger with sacred force. They protect the passage. They place words like guards at the thresholds. They turn language into armor. That is a key for the collective right now. Your next ascent may require protection around your speech, your mind, your body, your circle, and your sacred work. Not paranoia. Protection. There is a difference. Paranoia sees enemies everywhere. Protection honors the value of what is being carried. The pyramid texts say the soul is valuable enough to guard. The journey is serious enough to prepare. The rise is holy enough to defend. That is not fear. That is reverence. And some of the collective needed that, because you keep treating your own becoming like it can be left unattended in a room full of hungry opinions. Beloved, no. Guard the becoming. Guard the word. Guard the gate. Guard the rise. Now let the old stones speak into the living age. What if your life right now is a pyramid chamber? What if the pressure is not only pressure? What if the silence is carving a new utterance into you? What if the grief is not your burial, but your preparation? What if the old identity had to be sealed so the luminous one could gather strength? What if the thing you thought was an ending was actually the room where the sacred started writing your rise? This is not fantasy. This is pattern. Every transformation has a hidden chamber. Every rebirth has a dark passage. Every ascent begins somewhere that looks too still to be alive. A seed knows this. A womb knows this. A tomb knows this. The pyramid texts know this. The sacred does some of its finest work where the impatient eye thinks nothing is happening. People want the sunrise immediately, but the soul must first be gathered. The old scattered pieces must be called back. The mouth must be opened. The fear must be named. The offerings must be received. The false enemies must be cast out. The true path must be remembered. Then the rise begins. So the collective receives this teaching. Do not despise the chamber. Do not marry the chamber either. Let it do its work. Then rise. Do not let grief become your permanent address. Do not let trauma become your royal title. Do not let silence convince you that the divine forgot the words. The words are carved. The walls know. The stars are waiting. The gate is not closed forever. The soul is not finished. And the old stone is still speaking. You are more than what wrapped you. You are more than what buried you. You are more than what others mourned. You are more than the chamber that held you. You are becoming effective, luminous, Ahll-like, imperishable in wisdom, not because nothing ever hurt you, because the hurt did not get the final utterance. That is the lesson. The world may write endings, but the sacred writes ascent. The enemy may call it burial, but the soul hears instruction. The chamber may be dark, but the stars have not forgotten your name. And when the right word is spoken in the right place, with the right measure, the inner wall opens. The bones remember. The spirit rises. The sky receives. Seal of the scroll. I do not let the chamber name me dead. I gather my pieces, open my mouth with truth, and rise by sacred word. What tried to bury me becomes the wall where my ascension is written. The receipts say the pyramid texts are a collection of Egyptian mortuary prayers, hymns, and spells carved into inner pyramid chambers at Saqqara, with Unaz's pyramid the earliest known example, and Britannica calls them the oldest surviving body of Egyptian religious and funerary writings available to modern scholars. The Met notes that Yunus had pyramid texts carved inside his pyramid by the end of Dynasty 5, and Smart History adds that these texts were meant to aid the deceased in avoiding decay, ascending to the celestial realm, and becoming an effective being, an Ahll, in the afterlife. Tiny detail. Apparently the stone was not decorating. It was working. Receipts. Let's bring the receipts to the pyramid chamber, where the walls were speaking before papyrus got popular. The pyramid texts are among the oldest surviving sacred writings from ancient Kemet. They were carved inside pyramid chambers, especially at Saqqara, beginning with the pyramid of Unaz, the last king of the 5th dynasty. These were not decorative wall quotes. These were prayers, hymns, spells, utterances, and sacred formulas meant to protect, feed, awaken, guide, and raise the soul into the afterlife. The old stone was not trying to be pretty. The old stone had a job, and that job was resurrection work. The texts carried offering formulas, protective speech, sky ascent language, references to gods, star destiny, ritual action, and the transformation of the deceased into an Ahll, an effective luminous being. So when we say the chamber becomes a womb, that is not just poetic smoke in a fancy robe. That is the teaching. The body may be placed in the chamber, but the words are telling the soul, rise. Source names only. Encyclopedia Britannica, pyramid texts, the Metropolitan Museum of Art, Egypt in the Old Kingdom, Smart History, Ancient Egyptian Mortuary Texts, an Introduction, Smithsonian Institution, The Egyptian Pyramid, James P. Allen, The Ancient Egyptian Pyramid Texts. The hidden teaching of the pyramid texts is this: the right word, placed in the right chamber, becomes a ladder. Not every word is equal. Some words trap, some words feed, some words protect, some words open gates, some words call the scattered soul back into power. The pyramid texts teach that sacred speech is not noise with jewelry. It is force with direction. The chamber was dark, but the words were alive. The walls carried divine utterance, so the soul would not forget the path when the body could no longer speak. That is why the mouth matters. That is why the name matters. That is why the word matters. The soul rises through spoken power, remembered identity, ritual protection, and cosmic order. The modern age says, Be careful what you say. The ancient chamber says, "Beloved, your words are building the staircase or bricking up the door. Choose one, because the ancestors are tired of watching people argue with architecture." The pyramid texts are compassionate because they do not abandon the traveler in the dark. They say, feed the soul, protect the soul, name the soul, guide the soul, speak the soul upward. That is love with structure, not panic, not fear, not hopelessness. Preparation. And the collective needs that medicine. Because many are sitting in their own chamber right now, thinking the silence means they are finished. But silence is not always an ending. Sometimes silence is where the sacred starts carving the next instruction into the wall. Some of you are not buried. You are being gathered, your bones are being called back, your voice is being restored, your name is being remembered. Your spirit is being trained to rise without apologizing for surviving. That is not shallow inspiration. That is ancient stone medicine. The pyramid texts teach this. Do not let the chamber convince you that the story is over. The chamber may hold the old body, but the sacred word holds the rise. The silence may feel heavy, but the utterance still speaks. The world may call it burial, but the soul may call it preparation. So speak carefully over your own becoming. Do not carve defeat into your inner wall. Do not chant the old wound like it is your royal name. Do not keep embalming a version of yourself the sacred already dismissed. Write the rise, speak the rise, live the rise. Because what tried to bury you may become the very chamber where your ascension gets written. Here's the core lesson. No fog, no dusty tomb brochure, just the stone wall telling everybody to stop confusing silence with defeat. Core lesson. The core lesson is this. The chamber is not always where the soul ends. Sometimes the chamber is where the soul gets rewritten for the rise. That is what the pyramid texts teach. These were not just old words carved into stone for decoration. This was sacred speech doing a job. The walls were not trying to look important. The walls were working. They were feeding the soul, protecting the soul, naming the soul, guiding the soul, commanding the soul to rise. So the plain truth is this. Do not let a dark season convince you that the story is over. Some rooms feel like burial, but they are preparation. Some silence feels like abandonment, but it is instruction being carved. Some endings feel final, but they are only the old version of you being wrapped because it cannot carry the next assignment. And beloved, stop embalming what the sacred already dismissed. That old identity, that old fear, that old wound, that old name, that old story you keep polishing like it is a family heirloom. Let it rest. The pyramid texts say, gather your pieces, open your mouth with truth, speak the rise, remember your name. Do not let the chamber become your address, because the soul does not rise by accident. It rises by word, order, memory, protection, and alignment. A careless mouth can carve defeat into the inner wall. A trained mouth can carve a ladder. So watch what you speak over yourself. Do not keep saying, I am stuck, when the sacred is saying, you are being gathered. Do not keep saying it is over when the stars are saying, stand up. Do not keep calling it a grave when the whole chamber is full of instructions. That is the wisdom. What tried to bury you does not get the final sentence. The sacred word does. The world may call it an ending. The stone may call it a chamber. But the soul, when it remembers its power, calls it ascent. So rise. Not dramatically for applause, not loudly for performance. Rise clean. Rise named. Rise fed by truth. Rise with your mouth no longer carving prisons, but speaking ladders. Because the pyramid text did not come all this way through stone, time, dust, and empire, just for the collective to let one bad season write the whole ending. The chamber held you. It did not own you. The wall spoke. The soul heard. Now rise like the stone always knew you would.
To our beautiful collective, from our day ones to every new soul joining this journey, we love and appreciate you deeply. You've turned this space into so much more than a community. You've made it a family. Thank you, truly. Your presence, your energy, and even the smallest acts of kindness have the power to shift the compass for many in ways unseen but deeply felt. Here's to each of you, all new and the many more to come. We're just getting started, and we're so grateful you're here with us. With love and infinite appreciation from the collective of Shaman Ahll.
Beloved collective, As we close this scroll of the pyramid texts, let the stone wisdom settle into the heart. Legacy is not only what survives after time passes. Legacy is what speaks for us when our voice grows quiet. The old ones carved words into hidden chambers because they understood something sacred. A soul should not be abandoned in the dark. A traveler should be prepared. A name should be remembered. A spirit should be fed. A path should be protected. A rising should be spoken over with power. That is deep compassion, not the soft kind that looks away from the chamber, the strong kind that enters the chamber with bread, light, names, prayers, and instructions. The pyramid texts teach us that love prepares the way. Love does not simply cry at the closed door. Love carves words into the wall so the one inside remembers how to rise. That is legacy. May the ones who come after us inherit words that lift them. May they inherit names that strengthen them. May they inherit prayers with backbone. May they inherit stories where darkness is not the final ruler. Let them say, they did not let grief erase the rise. They did not let silence swallow the soul. They did not call every chamber a grave. They knew some dark rooms were wombs for the next becoming. Beloved collective, may your own legacy be carved with care. May your words feed more than they wound. May your wisdom protect more than it performs. May your love become a ladder for someone who forgot the sky was still calling. And when life places you in a chamber that feels too still, too quiet, too sealed, remember, you are not finished because the room got dark. The sacred may be writing your next utterance on the wall. So gather your pieces. Open your mouth with truth. Remember your name. Let the old wrapping loosen. The chamber held you. It did not own you. The stone has spoken. The stars are listening. Rise.
Until next time, your Sea Star Curacy, channeled by 3611027, the Beautiful Whisperer. Our Sea Star Devalan. Apply the news you can use.